Hello and welcome again, everybody, to another edition of the Analytics That Matter podcast. Um, this is and continues to be a regular podcast produced by the Analytics Working Group, which is affiliated with MESA, the Manufacturing Enterprise Solution Association. MESA International is an organization that is founded on the principle of helping industry adopt IT technologies for the benefit of OT efficiency and performance and capability. It is also a podcast that is sponsored and hosted by the RCA Institute. We have Larry White here from RCA. On our podcast today, we have John Jacque from Dassault Systems. We have Larry White, as I mentioned, from RCA. We have Todd Simon from By Aerospace, and we have Alex Cusack from Alta Vista, pardon me, Alta Via Consulting, and myself, I'm Chris Monchinsky from Automated Control Concepts. The topic that we're going to discuss during this podcast, we have the question posted here. The question is, how should smart manufacturing be positioned for the C-suite? This is a topic that we in the Analytics Working Group have spent a tremendous amount of time analyzing, studying, looking at, and documenting, most notably in the Analytics That Matter guidebook that was published through MESA last year. But it is a topic that's near and dear to a lot of the folks that are participating today. And so with that, I'd like to get an opening statement and thought from John Jacque, who will lead us off, and then we will go through each of our participants and have a little bit of a conversation about this question and what everyone's thoughts are. John, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. It's thanks again for having me on the show and for even for asking me to lead off here. This kind of evokes an interesting question because I'm going to kind of lead off with the fact that stop the frustration is the way I would start this as a function of positioning it for the C-suite. I'll admit the fact that I am an engineer and computer science guy. I got into this whole business because we get to play with the coolest toys ever, from robots to really cool automation that make the world go, move, and do all kinds of other things. However, for the C-suite, the biggest point of frustration is what's in it for them. First of all, even the term for the C-suite in many cases, smart manufacturing is even a confusing term with all the variants of manufacturing 4.0, 5.0, and anything else you want to call it. But smart manufacturing is about making things better, smarter. However, most of us in the industry have always focused on features and functions that we're applying to the factory floor without the connectivity to what is in it for the business. We can go on into deeper dives on that, and I'm hoping someone does beyond me. But above and beyond that, we need to focus on why we're here for more than just creating a new cool toy, new cool feature. Yes, I know that we're creating better analytics, we're creating better visualization. However, how does that add value to the business? Because if we're not thinking about that, we're just costing money and it doesn't add value, and we have to start thinking about that right up front. And with that, I guess that's my opening statement. I'm not sure where we want to go, but personal story, I was actually in a meeting where we had a whole team of people doing features and functions, and the executive basically chimed in about 2 hours into a session. He says, you guys aren't even talking about my biggest pain point. You guys have some interesting features and things, but what's in it for me? And that's when I was lucky enough to have someone in the room that was able to open up to that. And with that, I turn it back over to you, Chris.
Excellent. I mean, good thought process too, because I agree there's a lot of hype around smart manufacturing in general, the term, and also what it means. And MESA is actually doing a lot of work on this front as well, trying to develop a smart manufacturing contextualization in a new MESA model that's being worked on. I would ask, I guess, Todd, from an end user perspective, I mean, when people approach you about smart manufacturing and its benefits and whatnot, and John's pointing out, it's like there's a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of hype out there. Where do you see that benefit for your organization? Have you seen that benefit when people talk to you about their technologies and whatnot? What are you trying to solve, or how do you piece apart the takeaway from what they're advertising to you?
Um, Thanks, Chris. My own feeling about this is what you're trying to really understand is from either a micro or a macro view on the floor, on the manufacturing floor. You are, you've got a widget and you're going to change the way that that widget is produced. How does that flow through to your financials? And on a larger sense, how does it affect your strategy? I think is really what smart manufacturing, when properly implemented, can do for you is sort of the final mile. Think of it that way. That finance used to kind of try to model with varying levels of success, the actions and the operations on the floor. With smart manufacturing, you can actually get that down to a very finite, detailed level. And I think finally have a really accurate view of how operational changes flow through the financials and then can be extended, if you will, to both strategic and tactical decisions.
Interesting, interesting, and it's again a good point. Is that I think I know that you brought this up too, John, on several times, that there's obviously volumes of data out there. That's how we make sense of that data and how we apply it and use it for solving business problems that really ultimately remain still the goal. Larry, I know that you have been working, and of course you've made tremendous contributions with us in this working group towards the Analytics That Matter guidebook on a more holistic model that brings together OT and finance views of the organization with all of this data. Well, what's your thought process on what Todd said, and where do we take this discussion?
Well, I mean, I agree with Todd. There is, clearly at the end of the day, there has to be a benefit, a business benefit. But, what I want to urge people to do is to move a little bit beyond the pure business benefit. Certainly, as John indicated, move a little bit beyond the neat, slick things you're going to be able to do with the new toys. And, in the C-suite, you really have to think about the business strategy and the business model. And and if the C-suite hasn't thought strategically about how their business may change, how they're going to create more value for the customers and ultimately the shareholders, how they're going to solve business problems, how they're going to potentially restructure uh, what they sell and what they produce, um, then then it may not quite be time to have the discussion about the investment and the bells and the whistles. They may need a little bit more education about understanding exactly what Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing can bring to the manufacturing industry. So I just want to focus, even though my specialty in particular is costing and detailed financial analytics and the integration of operational and financial data. I think when you speak to the C-suite, the first thing you need to do is make sure they've thought beyond the toys, they've thought beyond the dollars, and they've thought longer range about the future of what they're doing and what the technology can can do to the products and services they're manufacturing. I mean, there's an example I read, about a company that manufactures valves, where they're going to keep manufacturing valves, but because of Industry 4.0 technology, they're actually starting to sell their valves as a service. where they maintain ownership of the valves and they agree to uptime, performance enhancements. They have the right to go in and change out the technology associated with their valves periodically to make sure they can continue to upgrade the performance. And that's a very different business than just putting valves in a catalog.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can think of some stories as well. A customer that I've worked with that is in the food and beverage industry, that their business or their sales cycle is somewhat cyclic based on season. And it's always been a challenge for them. They have a lot of markdowns and a lot of cost built into the supply chain, a lot of inefficiencies that they've identified. They've known about them for years. So they know what the business problem is. What they have realized is that the smart manufacturing technologies can be applied to rethink the way that they operate their supply chain, to put both the ability to monitor that real-time telemetry, but also to change the way they deliver, store, even agree to contracts in such a way that they can put more performance and value into the supply chain and streamline and build more efficiencies into it and eke out more dollars out of that supply chain, which is critical for this particular customer.
And
So,
that's a
I
great
mean,
example, because that means this isn't just about manufacturing, it's about restructuring the business as a whole.
Absolutely, and I think the supply chain is always where we kind of see the hit between, or the classic relationship between what the business understands the view of manufacturing, and manufacturing being an operational technologies being part of that supply chain, but a critical part of it that has to work in harmony with everything else. You made an interesting point, though, Larry, about the fact that the C-suite needs to understand, and in communicating to the C-suite, we need to get beyond just the bells and the whistles of the technology, and really help them to understand how the technology can be applied to solve new business problems, or I should say new business problems, but existing business problems in new ways. Alex, I know you have, from a marketing perspective, an angle on this and a thought. Please chime in and give us some information and an idea of how you might approach that.
Yeah, so Larry brought up what I guess would be a non-ideal customer, or the inverse to an ideal customer. So we have this company that has a problem, but they don't even know that they have a way to solve it yet. And they haven't been looking forward strategically into the far future, or looking at new ways to solve old current problems, as you put it. From a persona perspective, we want to kind of take those people, and we really want to educate them on the benefits of smart manufacturing. But smart manufacturing isn't a silver bullet. We can't just say, all right, well, it's here, just spend some CapEx and we'll fix all your problems. Like, no, that's not how it works. You definitely need some internal change too. So smart manufacturing is a lot more than just technology. It's like all things, it comes back to people. So I think the common consensus is that different companies have different views of the world, and you can kind of generalize it into some larger companies are more concerned about quarterly reports, and so they have a little bit of short-termism, and how we frame smart manufacturing for them is going to be way different than maybe a smaller private company that maybe has the luxury of being able to look a little bit further forward, but they're trying to solve the same or different problems, right? So the way to, I think, really sell smart manufacturing, not only externally from like a vendor point of view, but also internally, is to make sure that your company is ready for that change. And change is hard. I think we documented that in our book quite a bit. So the biggest thing I think to take away from this is you have to understand the use case, and vendors need to understand their use case and focus on educating a lot of these customers, because, you know, there was a time when Industry 4.0 was just attached to everything that had a sensor on it. And I think it's a little bit more than having a wireless Bluetooth doodad that measures temperature and vibration.
Hey, Chris, this is Todd Simon. I want to emphasize what Alex is saying. And of course, I'm going to betray my own prejudice, sort of in some ways like Larry, because I come at it from a cost and a financial standpoint. You know, just any pitch to the C-suite, and John can certainly testify, is understanding your target market. So since I deal with the CFO of my company most of the time, I know what buttons to push. I know what he's looking for, and I know what kind of pressures he's under. And in my case, it always leads from cost. Now, is that always going to be the case? I don't know, but it's almost like you have to come in, in my case, you come in with something very tangible and maybe not even that huge, but a clear, strong win. And at the same time, you are bringing in all the ideas about the fact that, you know, smart manufacturing can now allow you to answer the question you used to answer one way in a much broader and forward thinking way. But yeah, you kind of have to bring them. It's like any C-suite presentation. You got to bring them a win, whatever that win is.
Now, Todd, that's a really interesting point that you bring that up. You've got to bring them a win, but defining that win seems to be one of the biggest problems within smart manufacturing and some of the worlds that we live in, is defining the metrics of the win. And I'm going to go back to what Larry just said a few minutes ago. The win wasn't making more valves. The win was pivoting the company into a service of valves as opposed to manufacturing more valves.
New revenue stream potentially, and a new value add for their customers, which brands the product differently, positions it differently, puts them in a position where they can maybe have more customer loyalty because of their better service. All sorts of interesting avenues as a result. 100%.
Exactly. So how do we measure it? How do we create that? And this is where some of the things that we've talked about in the past is, you know, models to be able to say, where are we today? Where are we on the map, and where do we want to go? And then how do we define where we want that pivot to go to where Alex is saying? You know, is it a CapEx? Is it an OpEx play? What's the difference? How does that report to the P&L? There's so many different questions that we can start, and so many different avenues that we can go down. I think actually on that topic right there, I'd like to hear more about, I'd like to hear more from either Larry or Todd.
Well, I got to say that I take a little bit of issue with, you know, if you're going into a company trying to pitch smart manufacturing, and that company only has a very short-term, quarter-to-quarter focus, you're going to have a problem, because that company hasn't reached a point where it's ready to deal with long-term strategy and long-term success. It's likely you're dealing with a bunch of games playing, bonus seeking executives that are manipulating, to the extent they can, their performance incentives and financial statement. It's, you know, if you want to get an ROI, a great ROI, there's two ways to do it. You either cut the I or you increase the R. Cutting the I has had a very bad impact on particularly American manufacturing, you know, and increasing the R is seriously hard work. But no matter how you're going to look at that, the company has to decide what business it's going to be in for the long term, and then decide how to approach that business. And, you know, they've got to want to stay a manufacturer, and they've got to be prepared to look long term. Otherwise, they're going to miss a tremendous number of opportunities about how to restructure their business and how to redefine their competitive advantage.
That's an excellent point, because I was thinking, and again, to use John's statement from before, that when he first opened up the discussion, he was talking about himself being kind of a technical guy, and at least as an initial background, and being enamored by the technology. We can get a little enamored by a lot of the technology, but um, from a business perspective, if you're not in the position, or if you're not thinking strategically about how you can solve business problems for a long term, then the investment for smart manufacturing, or using these tools, and there's a lot of new tools out there that can enable the ability to solve new business problems that were previously unsolvable, or solved only in very difficult circumstances. Applying those technologies is going to be costly no matter what. So you really do have to have a long-term strategy, or a long-term horizon look, in order to justify that. And that's really one of the first things that I think you need to communicate, maybe to the C-suite, is what are your objectives? What are your objectives for the business? High, long term, and where do you view your new opportunities? And then how did these technologies potentially enable that vision to become reality?
Yeah, and you may have to change the way the C-suite looks at things. I mean, there are techniques, known as economic profit, EVA being one of them. There's some other approaches where, where if you focus on total stock return over the longer period, they make adjustments that have some credibility in capital markets, and with, serious investors, and they can show where how investment is going to produce a long-term return, and how the failure to invest is going to seriously diminish the long-term return of a company. So those kind of metrics, and metrics that support them, like costing metrics that maybe don't necessarily tie to the financial statement the way we're used to seeing traditional standard costing tie, start to become important once you realize that business today needs to be done with a much longer and broader view than quarter to quarter.
Chris, I have a question for John, since John oftentimes is part of the sales team. John, have you seen, or have you had a lot of success with what Larry's referring to? In other words, taking yourself sort of out of the micro up to the macro, because we all agree, really, smart manufacturing is about, not only survival, but oftentimes changing the way you do business. And I think then smart manufacturing becomes a much easier sell. So what's been your experience?
That is a great point, and oftentimes that is really part of the hard sell, because, like I said, I mean, the people with the pain that me or any of the companies that I've worked for in the past have been focused on are the ones that are with the pain points on the factory floor. I need to do this. This is where I'm getting dinged on. And that usually is the technology. Technology is, however, is really the support structure to get to that solution. How you get to the solution where you're creating a strategic vision is you need to have somebody in that C-suite, or in the at least an executive vice president level, that has a vision for the future. I mean, think about it. I mean, Larry was indicating, how do you understand and build a pivot point? Think about the fact that, where was Amazon, a couple decades ago? They were basically a book reseller that was online, that had an online presence. Amazon is now part of the largest supply chain vendors in the world. So it's a matter of having vision, and someone with vision. If somebody says that they're never going to make that change, that company is hopeless, and you need to be able to walk away, because they're never going to create the success for you or for themselves, and they're part of that dying breed. Because whether we like it or not, the world is changing around us, and we have to have a longer, higher vision, strategic view. And that's where people like Alex has a really good play on. He's able to understand, how do we work with even the the younger people that are starting to run some of these companies, whether it's an Amazon or whether it's a new startup, and how the new startups are actually looking at the world also. But it is making sure that you have someone with vision that is at the helm at that level. I hope I answered your question, Todd.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, excellent. So we are almost out of time here, but I am always fascinated by the fact that we have one question and we have spent a good amount of time talking about it. This working group always is good for a good debate, which is one of the reasons that we have success in putting these podcasts together. Closing thoughts. A lot of ground has been covered on smart manufacturing position for the C-suite. We've talked about a little bit of the litmus test of the C-suite. You know, finding that group of executives or executive that has that vision, that an organization that he or she is built around, that has that commitment. But at the same time, we've also talked about, I think, and made very clear that we have to really have, and this is, I always say, going back to the basics, a sound set of justifications, business cases, use cases, however you like to term it, that demonstrate, you know, short-term success and follow a long-term strategy, almost a combination of short-term short-term successes that string along into a larger roadmap for the organization. So it's a little bit of a both. So I would ask closing thoughts for anyone who would like to chime in.
Sure, I'll dive in. So I'm going to end with a quote, which is, you can't push a rope. So when it comes to positioning smart manufacturing internally for your C-suite, you really do have to do that maturity assessment and see if you guys are ready. If you're not, there's a bunch of steps you can take to get there. Too many to document here, but don't frustrate yourself by thinking that you need smart manufacturing when maybe you just need a little bit of a more mature setup first.
Let me build on what you just said. Am I interrupting, or you said?
Nope, I'm done.
Oh, okay, cool. To build on that is that builds on that is basically, do you have someone willing to take risk and say, I want to try something to achieve a new goal? Do I have the ability? Do we have the tool set? Because the biggest competitor that any company faces, that whether you're in pitching a smart manufacturing idea or getting them to change or modify their thought process around manufacturing, is we like the way we do it. We're not going to change anything. You're going to, I'll be dead and gone before you tear that spreadsheet out of my hands. If you're not willing to change, and I guess that's to your point, Alex, is you need to be mature enough and have an understanding that there is a vision, there is a goal, and am I willing to take a risk to try something new and create that organizational change along the way? That's my closing statement.
Excellent. So I think we're pretty much out of time. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, but if not, I'd like to say thank you to the participants again for the podcast. Always a pleasure. Hopefully you folks out there listening are enjoying this and learning something along the way. I will say again, this will be available and posted and hosted by the RCA Institute. It sounds like we're having some success in getting links and advertising for MESA too, which is awesome. This analytics working group meets under MESA as one of the many working groups that helps build the foundation for the work that is done at MESA to help collaboration between end users, vendors, solution providers, etc., in framing these kinds of questions surrounding manufacturing IT today, how it can be an enabler, how we can use this technology to better our businesses, etc. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you, and let's call this to an end.
Thank you, Chris.
Till next time.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Chris.
Like, share, and subscribe.
And remember, don't push rope.
Yeah,
Don't push
it was excellent. I've got that ingrained in my head.
it.
I'm going to use that later today.
Awesome.
Thanks, folks.
Awesome. Thanks.